The Brain That Wouldn't Die, 1962. A severed head, still conscious, trapped, whispering, seething with rage. The Brain That Wouldn't Die from 1962 carved its place in cult horror history with one of the most grotesque experiments ever put to film. A deranged surgeon, obsessed with defying death, keeps his fiance's decapitated head alive in a lab. But this isn't some sleek, futuristic setup. It's a nightmarish display of crude medical horror. Her head rests on a tray, tubes slithering from her neck, her eyes darting between terror and fury. And then the real horror begins. The film's most revolting moment comes when the doctor's failed experiment, a hulking, deformed abomination, finally breaks free. Kept locked away like a shameful mistake, the creature is a grotesque patchwork of flesh, the result of the doctor's reckless ambition. In a moment of gruesome irony, it turns on its creator, ripping into him while the severed head fiancé watches in eerie satisfaction. The low-budget effects make it even more disturbing. The stiff, unnatural movements, the jagged prosthetics, the grainy black and white film stock that makes everything feel just a little too real. Critics dismissed it as cheap schlock at the time, but over the years, The Brain That Wouldn't Die became a cult classic, embraced by midnight movie lovers for its bizarre mix of camp and horror. Some even claim the film's unsettling imagery influenced later body horror directors. Whether it was terrifying or just absurd, one thing is certain. Few things are as deeply disturbing as a severed head that refuses to die. X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, 1963. Dr. Xavier's descent into madness reaches its gruesome peak in X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, 1963, when he takes the ultimate escape from his cursed vision. After seeing through flesh, walls, and even the fabric of the universe, he claws out his own eyes in sheer desperation. Blood streaks down his face as he screams, "I can still see!" A line so haunting that it lingers long after the credits roll. Roger Corman, a master of low-budget horror, made sure the moment hit hard. The effect was simple, just clever makeup and Ray Milland's agonized performance, but the psychological horror was undeniable. Some film historians claim audiences were so disturbed that a few fainted during screenings, though no official records confirm this. What is certain is that the film's eerie bone vision effect, created with red filters and painted contact lenses, left Milland reportedly struggling with intense discomfort. Critics at the time were divided. Some dismissed it as schlocky horror, while others saw it as a chilling warning about the dangers of unchecked scientific ambition. Decades later, the film remains a cult classic, proving that sometimes the most horrifying thing isn't what you see, it's what you can never unsee. The Black Cat, 1934. Imagine sitting in a dark theater in 1934 watching Boris Karloff's sinister architect prepare his revenge. Then pure horror, a man being skinned alive, or at least that's what audiences thought they saw. The Black Cat didn't show the gruesome act directly, but director Edgar G. Ulmer masterfully used shadows and reaction shots to make it feel even worse. Bela Lugosi's character methodically flays his enemy, and though the camera never lingers on the actual deed, the suggestion alone was enough to make stomachs turn. The film's eerie, expressionist visuals and twisted themes, including necrophilia and psychological torture, pushed the limits of what pre-code Hollywood allowed. Censors in multiple countries demanded cuts, and even in the US, the newly forming Hays Code barely let this one slip through. Some film historians whisper that the scene was originally more graphic, but was trimmed before release, though no definitive proof has ever surfaced. Either way, The Black Cat remains one of the most chilling films of its era, a reminder that sometimes, what you don't see is even worse than what you do. The Fly, 1958. A tiny voice cries out, "Help me, help me!" But there's no rescue, only horror. In The Fly from 1958, Dr. Andre Delambre's experiment goes horribly wrong, leaving him with a fly's head and arm. But the real nightmare? A miniature version of him, human face trapped in a spider's web pleading for mercy as the arachnid creeps closer. The tension is unbearable, and then smash! A rock comes down, silencing the creature forever. For audiences of the time, this was beyond shocking. The grotesque fusion of man and insect, the helplessness of the tiny doomed figure, it was enough to make stomachs turn. Some reports claim theatergoers left nauseated, overwhelmed by the grotesque imagery. While no mass fainting was officially documented, there were murmurs of people feeling physically ill. David Hedison, the actor behind Andre, later spoke about the suffocating horror of wearing the bulky fly prosthetic. "It was claustrophobic, it was hot, and it was terrifying even for me," he admitted in interviews. And while Vincent Price, who played Andre's brother, didn't experience the transformation firsthand, he reportedly found the final scene deeply unsettling. The film's use of practical effects made it all the more disturbing. That tiny, human-faced fly, his shrill cries for help. It wasn't just a monster. It was a man fully aware of his fate. Even today, the image lingers in horror history. A chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying creatures are the ones that still have a human voice. House of Wax, 1953. A man stands frozen in terror as molten wax cascades over his body, sealing him in a gleaming, suffocating tomb. His muffled cries fade beneath the thick, scalding liquid. This wasn't some underground horror experiment, it was House of Wax, a 1953 shocker that left audiences squirming. Vincent Price, in his first major horror lead, played Professor Henry Jared, a sculptor with a sinister secret. His lifelike wax figures weren't just art. And this scene? It was his most nightmarish creation. The idea of a man being entombed in wax while still alive was gruesome even by today's standards, but in the 1950s it was downright appalling. Hollywood censors, already wary of excessive violence under the Hays Code, nearly balked at the film's macabre premise. Some reports claim that audience members gasped and turned away during screenings, overwhelmed by the sheer horror of it. Whether anyone actually fainted remains up for debate, but the film's use of 3D only intensified the experience. Imagine sitting in a theater in 1953 watching the wax seemingly drip into your lap. No CGI, just raw practical effects designed to make your skin crawl. Behind the scenes, the 3D technology brought its own set of nightmares. Actors had to hit precise marks to ensure the depth effects worked, and Vincent Price later joked that the real horror was trying to act while dodging technical mishaps. Despite, or perhaps because of, its shocking content, House of Wax became a massive hit, cementing Price's legacy as the master of menace. It would later be remade in 2005, but let's be honest, nothing quite captures the grotesque charm of the original. The Blob, 1958. A man stumbles into a diner, clutching his arm, his face twisted in agony. At first it looks like a burn, raw, glistening flesh, but then it moves. The translucent mass writhes, creeping up his arm, devouring him inch by inch. This was the moment in The Blob, released in 1958, that sent shivers down audiences' spines. No sharp teeth, no claws, just an oozing, mindless force of nature dissolving its victims alive. The horror came from its slow inevitability. Unlike the quick brutality of slasher films, The Blob made its victims suffer. The practical effects team used a silicone-based substance, sometimes referred to as silly putty, mixed with red food coloring to create the creature's gelatinous texture, making it look eerily organic. As it swallowed its prey, the effect was achieved with layered silicone sheets, giving the illusion that the man was being absorbed into the monster's body. It was grotesque, and for its time, shockingly realistic. Audiences recoiled at the idea of an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, outrun, or fought. The Cold War era was rife with fears of unstoppable forces, radiation, communism, nuclear annihilation, and The Blob tapped into that paranoia perfectly. Critics dismissed it as a B-movie, but its disturbing imagery and relentless horror cemented its place as a cult classic. And then there was Steve McQueen. At 28, this was his first leading role, playing a teenager, despite looking every bit an adult. He reportedly disliked the film, feeling it was beneath him, though the exact words he used remain debated. Some claim he dismissed it as a silly movie, though no definitive source confirms that. Regardless, it launched his career, paving the way for his rise to Hollywood royalty. Even decades later, that scene of the man being consumed remains one of the most unsettling moments of Golden Age Hollywood horror. No blood, no gore, just the unbearable sight of a human being slowly dissolving into a hungry, shapeless nightmare. The Tingler, 1959. Picture this, a packed movie theater in the late 1950s. The lights dim, the screen flickers to life, and suddenly pure terror. In The Tingler, Vincent Price's character watches in horror as a grotesque, centipede-like parasite writhes from a woman's spine. The creature, a slimy, pulsating monstrosity, was brought to life through eerie puppetry, its unsettling movements making audiences squirm. But the real horror? Some theaters rigged seats with Percepto, a gimmick that sent electric jolts through unsuspecting viewers. Some shrieked, others bolted for the exits, convinced the Tingler was crawling on them. And then came the infamous bathtub scene. In a film otherwise drenched in black and white, the water ran blood red, hand-tinted for maximum shock. It was a moment so jarring, some claim audiences gasped in revulsion, Critics called it a cheap trick, but Castle didn't care. His goal? To make people feel fear. And decades later, The Tingler still delivers. The Mask of Fu Manchu, 1932. The Mask of Fu Manchu, a 1932 shocker, pushed Golden Age Hollywood's boundaries of cruelty. Boris Karloff, already cemented as horror royalty, played the sadistic Dr. Fu Manchu, a villain who relished in torture. One of the film's most infamous moments? A brutal whipping scene, where each lash left deep, raw wounds. But that wasn't the only horror. Another victim suffered electrocution, his body convulsing under the relentless current. Critics at the time were appalled. Variety called the film sensational and sadistic, while British censors demanded heavy cuts before allowing its release. Some regions banned it outright. China, outraged by its racist depictions, protested its distribution, yet controversy didn't sink the film, it fueled its notoriety. Audiences drawn to its shock value made it a box office success, and rumors swirl that even Karloff himself found the role uncomfortable, though he never spoke publicly against it. Today, The Mask of Fu Manchu is studied less for its gore and more for its troubling legacy of racial stereotyping. But those torture scenes, they remain some of the most stomach-churning moments of early Hollywood, a grim testament to how far filmmakers were willing to go to shock their audiences. The Mask of the Red Death, 1964. Drenched in crimson and steeped in dread, The Mask of the Red Death turned Edgar Allan Poe's eerie tale into a feverish nightmare. Vincent Price's Prince Prospero, a sadistic nobleman, believes himself immune to the plague decimating the countryside. He throws a decadent masquerade ball, laughing at the suffering beyond his gates, until death itself crashes the party. A silent red-cloaked figure glides through the crowd, and one by one the revelers collapse, their skin erupting in grotesque red lesions. The disease doesn't just kill, it transforms its victims into horrifying spectacles of suffering. Wilkie Cooper's cinematography bathes the scene in deep, saturated hues, gold, black, and above all blood red, turning the slow, inevitable deaths into something both mesmerizing and revolting. Contemporary critics were divided, with some calling it decadent, and others praising its eerie beauty. Rumors swirl that the film's unsettling imagery nearly pushed censors to intervene, though no official records confirm this. Whether audiences were ready or not, the film cemented itself as one of the most visually disturbing horror films of its era. Psycho, 1968. A woman steps into the shower. The water runs, steam rises, and then chaos. A blade flashes. A scream rips through the air. 78 camera setups, 52 cuts, just 45 seconds on screen. And yet, Alfred Hitchcock's infamous shower scene in Psycho left audiences horrified, censors outraged, and Janet Leigh so shaken that she swore off showers for life. Leigh later admitted, "I stopped taking showers and only took baths. I thought, if I'm in a bath, I can see the door, and if someone comes in, I can see them." That's how deeply unsettling this scene was. Not just for viewers, but for the woman who lived it. The horror wasn't just in the violence, it was in the way Hitchcock filmed it. The stabbing itself, never actually shown. Instead, the terror came from rapid-fire cuts, the shrieking strings of Bernard Herrmann's score, and the illusion of brutality. The blood spiraling down the drain? Not blood at all, just chocolate syrup, chosen because it looked more convincing in black and white. Even the censors weren't sure what they were seeing. The Production Code Administration, the era's moral watchdogs, raised concerns about nudity and violence. But Hitchcock played them at their own game, submitting multiple versions to confuse them. In the end, the scene stayed, and Psycho became a turning point in horror history. Before this, Hollywood violence was restrained, sanitized, but Psycho shattered that illusion. Some argue Peeping Tom played a role too, but there's no denying Hitchcock's film changed everything. It paved the way for the slasher genre, influencing everything from Halloween to Scream. And more than 60 years later, that shower scene still holds power, not just because of what it shows, but because of what it makes you think you see. Peeping Tom, 1960. In 1960, unsuspecting audiences expected a stylish British thriller, only to be blindsided by something so unnervingly intimate, sending critics into a frenzy. Peeping Tom wasn't just disturbing, it was career-ending. The film's most infamous scenes, the murders, shot entirely from the killer's perspective, forcing viewers to see through his eyes as he stalked and terrorized his victims. His weapon of choice? A modified tripod with a concealed blade, ensuring his victims' final moments were spent staring into their own horrified reflections. It wasn't just gruesome, it was invasive, turning the audience into unwilling accomplices. British critics were outraged. The Daily Worker slammed it as the sickest and filthiest film ever made, while the Tribune accused director Michael Powell of degrading cinema itself. The backlash was swift and brutal, devastating Powell's once stellar career. Though not officially blacklisted, he found himself largely shut out of the industry, reduced to sporadic television work and independent projects. But here's the twist. By the 1970s, the film had undergone a radical reevaluation. Martin Scorsese, one of its most vocal champions, called it one of the most important horror films ever made. What once ruined a director is now studied in film schools, proving that sometimes a movie can be too ahead of its time for its own good. The Beast with Five Fingers, 1946. A severed hand that moves on its own? That was nightmare fuel in 1946. The Beast with Five Fingers delivered one of the most unsettling horror sequences of the Golden Age, featuring a disembodied hand that didn't just twitch, it stalked, strangled, and seemingly plotted its victim's demise. Audiences had never seen anything like it. The illusion was crafted with puppetry, stop motion, and camera tricks, making the hand's movements disturbingly lifelike. Some claim, though never confirmed, that a real human hand was used in certain shots, adding to the eerie realism. Peter Lorre's wide-eyed terror only amplified the horror, his performance making it feel as if the hand had a true vengeful will of its own. Censors weren't thrilled. The Hays Code, notorious for sanitizing Hollywood's darker impulses, reportedly scrutinized the film's macabre themes. While no official records confirm a direct attempt to censor the severed hand itself, the film's grotesque imagery and psychological horror pushed boundaries. Warner Brothers managed to keep the most shocking moments intact, arguing that the terror was more psychological than graphic. And yet, many viewers of the time found the film deeply disturbing, with some theaters allegedly receiving complaints about its nightmarish visuals. Over time, The Beast with Five Fingers gained a cult following, though its influence remains debated. The crawling, autonomous hand trope became a horror staple, appearing in films like Evil Dead 2, and even in the comedic realm with The Addams Family's Thing. Did those later creations draw direct inspiration from this film? No one knows for sure. But in 1946, this grotesque vision was groundbreaking, an era when horror thrived on suggestion, yet here was a film that forced audiences to watch as a severed hand carried out its gruesome revenge. A simple premise, but one that left a lasting, chilling impression. Freaks, 1932. A grand banquet, candlelit and eerie, filled with circus performers raising their glasses in a chilling chant, "One of us! One of us!" Cleopatra, the so-called normal trapeze artist, shifts uncomfortably as realization dawns. But this isn't just an awkward dinner. It's a moment of pure cinematic horror, one that sent 1930s audiences reeling. Freaks, released in 1932, didn't rely on rubber masks or special effects. Instead, it cast real-life sideshow performers, people with physical conditions rarely seen on screen. And that's exactly why it was deemed too disturbing for Hollywood to handle. MGM executives panicked. Test screenings reportedly ended in outrage. Some stormed out, others demanded refunds. Legends even whisper of a woman claiming the film caused her to miscarry, though no records confirm this. In response, the studio hacked the film down from 90 minutes to just over an hour, axing entire subplots and softening its most grotesque moments. But the damage was done. Freaks was banned in Britain for over 3 decades, labeled as exploitative and obscene. Director Todd Browning, once celebrated for Dracula, 1931, saw his career falter, though he continued working in Hollywood for a few more years. Yet, like all great horror, Freaks refused to stay buried. By the 1960s, underground film circles reclaimed it, reframing its raw, unfiltered portrayal as a defiant statement against prejudice. Today, it's hailed as a cult classic. Proof that sometimes, the most unsettling horror isn't supernatural at all, but disturbingly real. The Mummy, 1932. The theater goes silent. A figure wrapped in brittle, ancient bandages stirs. Boris Karloff's Imhotep isn't just waking up, he's clawing his way back from the grave. No dramatic music, no sudden cuts, just the slow, agonizing unraveling of a corpse that should have stayed buried. Audiences in 1932 had never seen anything like it. Some reportedly fainted, others fled the theater. And Karloff, he suffered for the horror. Jack Pierce's makeup process took over 8 grueling hours, layering glue-soaked gauze and cotton to create the illusion of a centuries-old corpse. The result? A face so cracked and lifeless, critics called it eerily authentic. But here's where things get murky. Some claim Karloff had to be cut out of the costume because the hardened materials restricted his breathing. No official records confirm this, but the legend persists. What's undeniable is the suffocating dread Karl Freund crafted. Shadows swallowed the screen, the camera crept like a silent stalker, and Karloff's stiff, deliberate movements made it feel like death itself had risen. It wasn't just horror, it was something deeper, something that burrowed under the skin and stayed there. And that's why The Mummy still haunts audiences today. Dr. Frankenstein, 1931. Lightning splits the sky, thunder rattles the lab, and Dr. Frankenstein watches in manic anticipation. Then life. A corpse, crudely stitched together, jerks awake, its dead eyes flickering with something unnatural. That moment in James Whale's Frankenstein was more than horror. It was a grotesque affront to nature itself. Audiences had never seen anything so morbidly fascinating. But what really unsettled censors? The infamous lake scene. The monster in his tragic innocence plays with little Maria, tossing flowers onto the water. Then he lifts her, expecting her to float just like the petals. She doesn't. The screen fades to black. Originally, the scene lingered longer, showing Maria's struggle before her fate was sealed. But the censors slashed it, deeming it too appalling. Some whisper that early audiences saw an even more graphic version, but if it ever existed, it's been lost to time. What remains is chilling enough. The abrupt cut to Maria's father, carrying her lifeless body, his face twisted in grief. Even with its edits, Frankenstein pushed boundaries, proving that true horror wasn't just about monsters, it was about the things they made us feel. The Phantom, 1925. Picture this. A packed movie theater in 1925. The audience is transfixed until Christine rips off the Phantom's mask. What follows? Screams, gasps, and, according to some accounts, even people fleeing their seats. While reports of fainting remain unverified, the shock was real. Lon Chaney's grotesque skeletal face wasn't just horrifying, it was a cinematic gut punch. Chaney, a master of transformation, designed the Phantom's look himself, though director Rupert Julian also had input. Determined to create something truly nightmarish, Chaney used wire hooks to pull his nose upward, black grease paint to hollow out his eyes, and jagged false teeth to complete the corpse-like effect. The result? A face that looked like it had clawed its way out of the grave. But this wasn't just makeup. It was endurance. The wire contraptions caused him constant pain. His eyes burned from the petroleum-based paint, and yet he never broke character. Some say the torment only added to the Phantom's eerie presence on screen. Critics at the time called it too much, too grotesque, too disturbing. Yet that's exactly why it worked. The Phantom wasn't some cartoonish villain. He felt unnervingly real, as if he could step right off the screen and into the audience's nightmares. Nearly a century later, Chaney's Phantom remains one of the most haunting transformations in film history, a testament to the power of practical effects and sheer dedication to the craft. The Man Who Laughs, 1928. Imagine being forced to wear a smile, forever. Not out of joy, but as a mark of cruelty. That's the horror of The Man Who Laughs, where Conrad Veidt's character, Gwynplaine, has his mouth carved into a grotesque grin as a child. The moment his disfigurement is revealed is pure nightmare fuel. His lips stretch unnaturally wide, exposing his teeth in a way that looks disturbingly inhuman. And this wasn't some early Hollywood trickery. His makeup involved rigid prosthetics that reportedly made it difficult for him to speak or eat between takes. Some say the discomfort added to his haunting performance, though first-hand accounts are scarce. What's undeniable is the film's lasting impact. That eerie grin? It's widely believed to have inspired the Joker, though Bob Kane never explicitly confirmed it. Still, the resemblance is uncanny. The Man Who Laughs isn't just unsettling, it's tragic. Gwynplaine is a man trapped in a monstrous face, shunned despite his kindness. The film forces you to stare into that horrifying smile and see the pain beneath it, making it one of the most visually disturbing moments of early Hollywood. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.